I'm Mike Graham. This is Putin's war. It's a weekly update on what's going on in Ukraine, what's happening in Moscow, and how the rest of the world is reacting to events. Hugh Andree is here with me once more. Hugh, very good afternoon to you.
Mike.
It's been a very interesting week. There's been a lot of action, the bridge being blown up, retaliation from Putin's armies and air force. Tell us what's been going on.
We're all very aware now that on last Saturday, the Kerch Bridge, which provides the sort of connection between Crimea and the southern area of Ukraine, extremely important strategically for Putin and for Russia, was hit, we believe, by what we call a vehicle-borne IED, an improvised explosive device. Although that hasn't necessarily been confirmed, it's certainly what Putin wanted the world to believe, as he called it, a terrorist attack.
Yes.
It was, however, a real blow on the nose for Putin. That bridge was opened, to a great fanfare back in 2018 at a great cost. I think it was $2.5 billion. It's about 12 miles long. It's a 12 mile long,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's an extremely long bridge, and Putin himself showed what an accomplished trucker he was by driving his lorry along it to open, which we can see in the footage.
And it's got a rail section and a road section, right?
Rail and road, indeed. But this will be, this will be seen as a very powerful, symbolic and strategic blow to the Kremlin.
Hits at the heart, I suppose, of what they want everyone to believe, which is that they are this sort of superpower that can not be assaulted, that cannot be assailed, that can do whatever it wants. But you said something interesting about the way the bridge was blown up and why you think it might not be quite what's been explained.
As I said, there are probably three options for this bridge to be attacked. One would be a missile strike, which I think is probably unlikely. If you look at the footage of the bridge exploding, you would see craters, as we've seen on television all week, due to the retribution from Moscow. The second option, as stated, would be a vehicle-borne device. Certainly sources that I've spoken to believe that is the case, and that the freight train that was also on the bridge at the time, 7 fuel tankers happened to be there, went up. Interestingly, though, I've looked at the footage a number of times, and if you look at the footage which is playing now, you'll see a very obvious bow wave below the bridge in the river. Yeah,
that was spotted, wasn't it?
That may well provide an option for a maritime delivered device, and the technology's there now to have unmanned vessels. And it could be that a vessel...
You see a big flash, don't you? But it's not clear where that's come from.
And if you look very closely, to me, it looked like the flash was coming from behind the lorry. But I just think it's really interesting that bow wave below the bridge may suggest that device was fired from below.
Yes. So it could have been on a boat or a sort of drone almost of some kind?
Yeah, it would be an unmanned vessel. I think if you asked a demolitions explosive, was it a success, if they were going to put their technical hat on, they might just give it a B+. Because ultimately, you always look, if you're looking to destroy a bridge and make it unpassable, therefore inoperative, we would always look to destroy at least 30 meters of bridge, because the Soviet bridging capability is not great. It's still a little bit in the dark ages, and I think the maximum that used to get up to is about 25 meters. So it was definitely a bloody nose. It was definitely symbolic. It certainly, again, demonstrate how Ukraine really is on its ascendancy. And by that, I mean on land-borne forces being able to penetrate behind Russian lines and hit strategic targets.
So that would be considered Russian territory.
Yeah, that would be. And I happen to know as well that Ukrainian special forces have hit airfields and other strategic locations that the Russian forces hold. So, again, what we're seeing here is the ascendancy of the Ukraine land-borne forces. It links into what we've been talking about, their training, their professionalism, and, of course, the kit and equipment they're receiving from the West is very, very important. And that was mentioned by President Zelensky at the G7 conference that took place, I think, yesterday.
Yeah.
And he continued to request further support for the Ukrainian forces. And as I said, I think that is exactly what is needed now.
Yes. And, of course, Putin had to show that that could not happen to Russia on Russian soil, if you like, even though it wasn't technically soil, without some form of retribution, which is what then happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really, as we see at the moment, his only option is what I would call the long-range snipers, long-range artilleries, missiles being fired from Russian-held territories into Ukraine. It's interesting that at one point he'd fired circa 83 missiles, of which 47 were taken down before they landed. And what I believe is going to be absolutely key now is that G7 provides Ukraine with a really effective air defence system. And it looks like Germany's coming to their aid.
Right. Because for a long time they asked for a no-fly zone, didn't they?
Yeah.
And that was kind of resisted on the grounds that it might hurt Ukraine more than it would hurt Russia.
Yes, and it was one of the reasons why the US were a bit hesitant initially at giving Ukraine long-range missile capabilities, because they don't want them being lobbed into Russia with effectively the stars and stripes printed on the side. My understanding is that Ukraine have promised not to do that and not to fire them near the border.
Okay.
But what we are going to see imminently is the arrival of the German Iris air defence system. And I think that could potentially change the way the war really is.
Because the missiles that hit Kiev all week, I mean, where were they coming from?
Yeah, they're coming mostly out of Russia, Russian-held territories, possibly even Belarus, and we saw them raining down.
They're being fired from land rather than from planes.
The ballistic missiles can be fired from vehicles, from maritime, from ships, and indeed delivered by aircraft. What the Germans will be providing Ukraine with is an air defence system that can combat those missiles. And the Iris system, which we can see here, it's a vehicle-borne air defence system. It can strike out to 40 kilometres and to an altitude of 20 kilometres. That's 12 miles. And one of those vehicles can protect a whole city. The first one, the German Chancellor promised the arrival of the first system within days, and another 3 before the end of the year. So it's imperative they get that system. Once they have that system, that really is going to reduce Russia's capability at striking into Ukraine.
Right, and there's not much around that then for them. Or would they adopt a different form of attack, perhaps?
Well, what are they left with? And then we come all the way back to nuclear or not. Their ground forces have been withdrawing. They've been retreating further. The Ukrainian forces are on their ascendancy. The Russian conscription of 300,000 is not going to plan at all. So the option really is, as was discussed by the G7, maintain the pressure, keep up the supply of military support and humanitarian support. Let's not forget that. And then hopefully at some point, some sort of decision will need to be made within the Kremlin as to whether or not, this special operation is really worthwhile.
Right. And then brings us to the end and my question of what happens next and what happens maybe the next few days. And there is a bit of a sort of rapprochement going on.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. And I cast my mind back to when Putin engaged with President Erdogan from Turkey
Yeah.
to get the grain released back in June.
Yeah.
We've also seen Mohammed bin Salman, allegedly. We've seen Roman Abramovich, allegedly negotiating the release of British prisoners of war.
Yeah.
I think Erdogan is well positioned. He gets on well with Ukraine and he gets on well with Russia. So I would certainly be urging him to perhaps offer up an opportunity to meet somewhere on neutral ground and discuss. We shall see.
We shall see. For the moment, Hugh, thank you very much indeed. This is Putin's War. We'll be back with more next week.